This old guy DIY video has to do with the differences between the older Savage Axis stock and the new model Savage Axis Ergo stock. So the old style is on top, the Ergo stock is beneath it. And you can see the recoil pad on the old one is that vented design. Recoil pad on the new one is this more corrugated, and actually feels like the old one is softer. The edge on top of the new one is angled as opposed to the old style. Both stocks have metal sling swivel studs. When you look at the new Ergo stock, it has this piece that might lead some to believe, hey, I could take that thing off and make this into a youth stock. Well, I removed the recoil pad. There are just two Phillips head screws that come in from the end. And when you remove those, the pad and the 1-inch section come off, leaving you with this piece of stock. And then I took the pad and put it up against the bottom of the stock to see if it would fit, and no, it does not. And then I called Savage and asked them if there was something specific, if it's a design feature, or if in fact it was meant to be used as a youth stock. And they indicated that it's just the way they designed it. There's no sense in taking that recoil pad off because you can't attach the recoil pad to the stock without having this spacer in it. So I suspect it had something to do with the process of molding the stock, and if they made this a separate piece, everything flowed better. To remove the recoil pad on this one, if you choose to, it's just two Phillips head from the end. Let's see here. You see those two holes. And then to remove the stock on the old style, you take this stud out, just stick a nail through it, and then you can turn it out. And then there's a tab here on the back, and you just push in on that tab, and the thing will pop right out. So then the next difference I noticed was on the old style, you have this trigger guard assembly, and the way they made the difference between the long and short action, and in this case it's a short action, but the stock can be used on both long and short action calibers. When you want to change calibers, you just drop the other receiver in. If you're going from short to long, for example, you would drop your 30-06 receiver into this stock, and then you buy a trigger guard for a long action rather than this one for a short action. So on a long action, the edge of the trigger guard might be back here by my finger instead, so it leaves room for a longer magazine. But that was their initial design a number of years ago. And on the new one, rather than sacrifice the rigidity here, you separate this thing and it doesn't leave a lot of plastic, and I don't know if they had any problems with breakage or just complaints about potential weakness. Here they left it as a rigid piece, and there's just this one little block that comes out, and this is the only thing that has to be switched now to go from long to short. So on the short action, you can see that it's probably 1.5 inches, and on the long action, the block would just be shorter here. But by leaving the trigger guard molded in, and you see the trigger guard is kind of square now on the new one. The old style Ergo was rounded. And then to come to the front, you can see here, this is indented and feels pretty heavy, and it feels like a much more solid stock. And you can see the contours are different on the old one. When comparing the body of the stock, if we look at the original Axis, you see that we have two channels there, and then the lug. And particularly one of the complaints online, and I have an Axis and I kind of agreed with it, it seemed like there was a lot of flex in the forend. And you see how they had this originally with the vertical, or perpendicular, I should say, cross member. They just had that one line running down the middle, and then they had 3 areas with your cross supports. And this was for the standard sporter barrel. When you look at a stock for the heavy barrel, it had some parts that were coming in at an angle, kind of making X's. And now when we look at the new Ergo stock, you see the standard for a sporter barrel has the X shape very similar to what the old bull barrel stock had. So when holding this new stock and grabbing the front end and trying to flex it or twist it, it's certainly much more resistant to flex and twisting than the old style was. So I think that's a design change they made that certainly makes it better for the guy who's taking his gun out hunting. When I initially bought an Axis a number of years ago, I was disappointed with the way the stock felt, because I thought I have to go spend $200 on a Boyd stock now just because this one, in my opinion, was very flimsy. But on the Axis I got here at Black Friday, this thing is nice and rigid. It passes the dollar bill test. You can drag a dollar down through it and see that in fact the thing is free floated. And I'm not going to feel bad at all about leaving a standard stock on this Axis with the Ergo stock. I think this stock is much nicer and more rigid than the old style. Then the last difference I noted between the new and old style is the old style Axis had this magazine that has a plastic clip on the front. You can see it's just heavy plastic and it snaps in. And the new style magazine, I did a separate video on this, has a little spring-loaded assembly, and it just clicks in nicely. In the new style, on the base plate it says Savage. The old style base plate said nothing, but the new style magazine snaps in with authority, and in my opinion is a much better design. So those are the differences I see between the new style Savage Axis Ergo stock and the old style Savage Axis stock. In my opinion, the Ergo stock is much nicer, and I'm going to just leave the Ergo stock on the gun that I recently bought for hunting. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a nice day.